many people, by a show of hands, will admit to the fact you don't really get modern art? You're a little bit mystified with abstraction. A lot of people are. Well, that's okay. That's the purpose of this lecture, is to show you that there was a logical progression throughout history that brought us to the abstract and modern artwork of today. It wasn't a random occurrence. There was really, really valid reasons for it. The object of this lecture is not to cover any specific movement in depth, but to really show you that there was a real logical and cohesive pathway, and that art changed the way that it changed for very good reasons and for logical reasons. From cave art to pop art, the last 38,000 years in an hour. We're going to have to move quickly. There's one big question we have to start off with, though, and that is, what is art? What really is art? Well, we could spend 7 years, 8 hours a day, just asking that question, just trying to answer that one question. My answer, and for the purpose of this lecture, we'll say the answer of what is art, is anything that's created to be a work of art and communicate something. At the end of the day, none of us in here really have to decide what is and what isn't art. We just need to decide what we appreciate as a work of art. And that'll be a theme through the lecture as well. Art's really part science, part magic, part imagination, and part truth. It's the way that artists try to express the things we don't know how to say and don't know how to write about. Artwork showed up on the planet Earth about 38,000 years ago. And contrary to what most people believe, not just in the cradle of humanity, not just in Mesopotamia and the Tigris-Euphrates valleys, but on every continent on the planet Earth except for Antarctica. I guess it was just too cold to paint there. And these cave paintings, these hieroglyphs, petroglyphs, show up dated about 38,000 years ago. But why? Why did the first caveman or cave woman pick up that piece of charcoal, that chipped, colored piece of stone, and scratch something on the wall of a cave? What was the focus? What was the reason? Communication, somebody said. Yeah, that's the perfect answer. That's the exact correct answer. Communication. Artwork predates written language. Created and drew on cave walls to communicate the events of our everyday life, or, most importantly, to try to answer the unanswerable questions. Why are we here? What happens after we die? And that has remained completely unchanged for the last 38,000 years. From 1200 BC until about 200 BC, all of a sudden we go from extremely primitive artwork, almost a prehistoric artwork, a very tribal look to artwork in Western civilization, to quite sophisticated architecture and quite good representations of what we see in our everyday life. So why this big jump? Why all of a sudden did the artwork improve so drastically? Well, it was the time of Aristotle and Plato and Socrates. It was the birth of geometry and logic and the study of natural laws. The Romans happened. Another huge empire, one of the greatest empires in Western civilization in the history of man. And the Romans really borrowed from the Greeks. You know, a lot of the Roman mythology were the same gods and goddesses and heroes and titans of Greek mythology, just with the names changed. They borrowed a lot of their religion and mythology from the Grecian civilization. They also borrowed a lot of their artwork to make man larger than life. So we're not, at this point, really representing things exactly as they are in nature, but instead we're using art as a tool to make us bigger than we really are. It was a time where the value of a human life meant very, very little. It was a very, very dark time, and we almost lost all literacy. Now, some good things happened in the art world. It has left us, Dark Ages have left us, especially the time of Charlemagne, some lasting monuments to the human spirit. And really what you see that in this time in history are the cathedrals. What does this tell us, though, about art in general? We're still trying to answer the unanswerable questions. If the greatest thing that art gave us at that time were cathedrals, religion, does it not show that art was becoming almost entirely focused on religion? In reality, art was becoming almost completely controlled by the church. It's a great way to disseminate their ideas and their faith. How many people here have visited Trinity College in Dublin in Ireland? Did you go to the library? Of course, you must have gone into the library. You saw the Book of Kells. If it wasn't for many of these monks recording written history, then we might have lost history prior to the Dark Ages up to that. The Rebirth, the Renaissance. How many people have heard of the Renaissance? Another utopian period in the pathway of Western civilization. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, Donatello were all subscribe to the philosophy of humanism. Still very controlled by the church, however. Creation by Michelangelo on the left, from the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. On the right we have who? The Mona Lisa. So Leonardo da Vinci created the Mona Lisa. He was not just an extraordinary painter, he was also an extraordinary humanist, a great thinker, a very forward thinker at the time, and one of the most fantastic painters, the first pop star on the planet Earth. Michelangelo, beautiful from every single angle. Extraordinary. My favorite painter was Renaissance. Now we see the introduction of the very dramatic use of light and shadow. The character in these faces. Unlike most of the artists of the time, Caravaggio was a bear of a man. He was boorish. He was tried for murder, for killing a man with his bare hands. And it's the introduction of printmaking. It's a time when Dürer started to do woodblock engravings and etch that carefully enough, and with enough precision, you can get something that looks like a pencil sketch. Extreme skill, extremely difficult when you look at that. Look at the character, look at the breaks, look at the scars. It's really a poignant story. Night Watch, you're right, Night Watch. Again, Rembrandt, almost as technically proficient with the paintbrush as Leonardo da Vinci. He was a technician. He could paint anything that he saw. Foreboding feeling in his artwork, this idea of somber weight in the art reason for it as we move closer to the 20th century. Four concurrent movements through the 18th to 19th centuries. All very different, but all very important when it comes to the pathway of sugary, sweet pictures for a frivolous aristocracy. They were all surface, no substance. Neoclassicism, right in the opposite direction. Manipulate your people through the use of 9 feet tall and a rearing white stallion with explosions in the background. He looks larger than life, he looks fearsome, and he looks the scenes of civic and political virtue describe the neoclassics. Romanticism, melodramatic illustrations of imaginary subjects. Beauty for the sake of beauty. Bring on the low lifes and ugly stuff. You know, this is the part of the museum that when you walk to, you go, yeah, maybe just walk a little faster through this part. Artwork was stagnating. There was really no innovation. Everybody was painting the same kind of stuff, which is where we come to the change. A camera, you're right. Can you imagine? You spent 60 years of your life learning how to capture something exactly as you see it on a canvas, and some joker goes off and invents the Kodak Quick Snap. Well, artists had to capture something different. They had to reevaluate what they wanted to capture and how they Salon des Refus, the Salon of the Refused. The Salon des Refus grew to be known as a group of artists known as what? The Impressionists. You're right. And they said, when you go out to paint a landscape, don't paint this little tree, this little shrub. Paint this square of blue, this oblong of yellow, this swatch of green. Exactly as the colors come to your eyes, and slowly, your own naive impression of the scene will appear. So Impressionism is capturing simply the color that comes to your eyes, not the forms that you see. Now we think of Impressionism today as quite traditional, quite conservative. No, they were the Harley-Davidson bikers of the art world at that time. They were the wild men. They were changing everything. Cezanne and Van Gogh, probably the most prominent post-impressionists. Cezanne's apples were not apples to me. I found them intimidating. They were like cannonballs to me. He really found them very, very powerful, and that was because we were using brighter colors we don't see in what we're looking at. Not capturing exactly what Van Gogh, one of the most emotional artists who ever lived, deeply. He feels tenderly. Post-impressionism introduced an artist's interpretation of what not just what we saw, but how we felt about what we saw. The new art. And critics said, there is nothing of value there. It is childish, it's unfinished, it's garish, it's primitive. It's like Donatello among the wild beasts. Well, Les Fauves in French translates to the wild beasts, and that style was forever coined. Why does it feel like these two ladies are angry with each other? Why does it feel like they're in love? And Matisse became more concerned with the feelings communicated by his artwork than what it looked like. So like a sculptor who strips away clay from a block to leave a finished image, Matisse started to strip away the realism, to give us brighter colors, passionate colors, colors we don't see in real life, to communicate emotion, feeling. Expressionism is all about how something feels inside. Don't spend too much time looking at it trying to figure out what it looks like. Go, oh man, that really is scream, it's pain. It's depression there. Take an emotional journey towards the artwork. We get much more from it than trying to analyze it in an intellectual way. And when I decide to paint it, I can walk around the room and look at it from any direction, can I? I can choose where in the studio I'm going to look at that. I can lie on the floor, I can look at the bottom of the stand. Or I can climb up a ladder and look down at the top of that pitcher of water, that vase. So why, when I paint it, am I forcing you as the viewer to stand in one spot? Can I not? Is there not a way to show multiple angles of a single object simultaneously? Okay, so cubism, very simply, is many different angles and views of one object at the same time. Picasso, we know, the most important artist of the 20th century. He charged into the barriers of art. He changed not only the way we create artwork, but what we perceive of as being artwork. I guess it's a bit of a giveaway, the big Chagall in the middle of the screen. Marc Chagall, one of the most important artists of the 20th century, certainly the most important Jewish artist of the 20th century, that we are not bound by the limits of our physical form, but instead, as human beings, we are bound only by the strength and the limits of our spirit. Look for the feelings in these paintings, and they will mean that much. A reviewer at the Armory show said, "Nude Descending a Staircase" by Marcel Duchamp should be more aptly titled "An Explosion in a Shingle Factory." Salvador Dali, who was kicked out of the Surrealist movement. Andre Breton removed him from the movement. Why? Because he exhibited a painting that was not acceptable. He said, "What do you mean it's not acceptable? We created this movement so that we could paint anything we wanted. We wanted to be able to capture our dreams." Next comes one of Salvador Dali's great quotes. He said, "The only difference between me and a surrealist is that I am a surrealist." But remember, this is the same guy who said, "The only difference between me and a madman is that I'm not mad." So wrap your noodle around that. There are some days when I think I'm going to die from an overdose of satisfaction. And the art world said, "What do you mean it's not a pipe? Of course it's a pipe. We can all see it's a pipe. You can't say it's not a pipe." He said, "Think about it for a second. It's not a pipe. It's a painting of a pipe." But we come to America's greatest contribution to the art world. We come to the abstract expressionists, the action painters of the late 40s and 50s in New York City. Pollock was the drip painter. He took huge canvases, he took them from the easel, he put them on the floor of the studio, and he took house paint and he splattered it from every side. My reaction to Pollock was probably the same as yours the first time I learned about him. I thought, how hard could that be? Why is that important artwork? What's significant about that? He was the first one to say, to have the courage to say, let's forget about what we see and paint entirely how we feel. I call him Jack the Dripper. My first favorite, my absolute favorite, is Mark Rothko. You may have heard me say this at the auction. I often say, you know, sometimes the artwork that you love the most is the artwork that you won't be able to explain why you love it to anybody. I can stand up right here, I can give you every textbook definition of why Rothko is revered as a color field painter, as a groundbreaking artist of the abstract expressionist, but it means nothing to me. All I know is that when I see Rothko's artwork, it moves something in me. I really feel Rothko's art. But remember, it's very important you try to figure out not what it looks like, but how it makes you feel. Okay? Now, if we're in a museum this cruise, and I'm standing behind any of you, I don't want to walk up behind you and hear someone say, "Well, honey, it could be a fire truck. But if I turn my head slightly, it kind of looks like a bowl of grapes." I don't want to hear that. I want to hear, "Well, that kind of makes me feel good," or "That kind of makes me feel angry." No, he was saying, why, for the first time in history, does a nation of 250 million people feel like they know someone who they have never met and never had a conversation with? He was asking us to examine that cult of personality.